and we appreciate your feedback, so please respond to the webinar survey. Your responses will help us shape our 2018 webinar topics. So a little bit about CCLEAR, if you're not familiar with us. We are an EPA Technical Assistance to Brownfields Communities grantee, and through the TAB program, we provide technical assistance to a variety of stakeholders. We do this via workshops and webinars such as this one, and we are active as consultants, and you can always visit our website or give us a call if you want to know more or have any questions. We have contact information in the bottom right corner of this slide, so feel free to reach out to us. You can also follow us on social media for news, events, and the announcements of our upcoming 2018 webinars. And also make sure to look out for us at the National Brownfields Conference in Pittsburgh in December. So first off, we have a couple of questions for the audience. Firstly, what sector do you work in? All right, the results are coming in. It looks like about half of us are in the environmental sector, 0% engineering, 14 planning, and 24% other. Second question is, how many years have you been involved in the land reuse field? Okay, and it looks like about half of us are fairly new to this field. That's exciting. And then the final question is, which EPA TAB region do you work in? And you can look at the map if you're not sure. All right, it looks like we have 11 in NJITs, 21 in KSUs, and 68 in CCLEAR, so reach out to us if you ever need any help. I'm really excited to introduce today's presenters to you. Firstly, we have Christina Wilson calling in from Colorado, and she's a Brownfields project manager with the EPA. Christina will be talking about Denver Urban Gardens and EPA programs, and she works with state and tribes on various grant programs in Region 8. Next up will be Roseanne Albright. She's an Environmental Programs Administrator for the City of Phoenix Office of Environmental Programs. Roseanne manages the Phoenix Brownfields to Healthfields program and is a champion of helping communities with food access and health services. And last but not least, we have Benjamin Fahrer, who's actually sitting right next to me. He's the owner and operator of Top Leaf Farms, a company that designs, builds, and operates urban farms with a focus on rooftop farming and ecological services here in California. And CCLEAR was actually lucky enough to go to one of his rooftop farms earlier this year. So Christina will take it from here.
All right. Welcome all, and Johanna, thanks for introducing us. And for everyone else on the phone, thanks for joining us today. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency Region 8 Brownfields program, and I'll primarily be talking about EPA's partnership with Denver Urban Gardens and how we have leveraged our targeted brownfield assessment program to help them with assessments at proposed garden sites. And just to back up for a minute, I want to make sure everyone knows how EPA defines brownfields. We define them as a real property wherein the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse, which may be complicated by the presence or even potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. So it's often these vacant properties or brownfield sites that no one wants to touch for fear of contamination that become candidates for garden sites. And those are some of the examples that I will be discussing today. So next slide, please. Okay, sorry. So if you're not familiar with Denver Urban Gardens, it's an organization out here in Denver that manages over 150 gardens in Metro Denver and surrounding areas. Their annual production exceeds 500 tons a year. And in addition to the produce, the gardens create other benefits, which include, really helping to beautify neighborhoods, improving soils, and sort of overall strengthening the communities. I know that there are many similar garden nonprofits in other cities around the West. Here in Denver, we have worked most extensively with Doug, so my examples are going to, in this presentation, are really Doug-centric, but this is something that could be easily replicated in other areas. Next slide, please. So our brownfield program began working with, so Denver Urban Gardens, as I said, I refer to them as Doug, began working with them in 2013. We've been conducting phase 2 environmental assessments at any new or expanded garden sites that Doug has brought to our attention and selected. Having EPA test the soils at new garden sites has become part of Doug's procedure for all of their new garden sites. And these phase 2 assessments that we do involve sample collection and analysis along with an EPA toxicologist review of the data, and then our toxicologist also helps develop recommendations for appropriate future uses of the said property. So these proposed garden sites are usually vacant lots where the history isn't necessarily known, and Doug wants to be sure that their sites are suitable for gardening and consuming produce. To date, we've done over 20 assessments at new or expanded sites, and each one has been given the green light to proceed with gardening. About half the assessments we've done were for neighborhood community gardens, and the other half have been at schools. We've seen a big push with Denver Urban Gardens to go into schools and help them create gardens that not only the community are involved with, but then the students also get to garden, and a lot of these foods end up in their cafeteria, which is pretty cool. Next slide, please. So, with our partnership with Doug, we've used targeted brownfield assessments to conduct phase 2s at no cost to the recipient or Doug. When we perform a targeted brownfield assessment, EPA uses our own contractor to conduct an assessment, and there's no cost to a requester. So TBAs are available to nonprofits, municipalities, and tribes nationwide from your EPA regional offices, and also all of our states also have programs that you can tap into that offer similar services. One of the really attractive thing about our TBAs is you can apply for these throughout the year. It's a really easy 2-page application that's on our website. It's a non-competitive process, and the turnaround time is pretty quick. Typically, it's about 3 months start to finish. If there are the time constraints that we need to work around, though, it's definitely something we can take into consideration. Beyond the simple application, there's no paperwork on your end and no contract between your entity and EPA. The only thing that we need is an access agreement between your organization and the property owner. And one thing here, I'm focusing really on phase 2s for this presentation because in the case of the garden sites that we've worked with, we're not dealing with any transfer of property ownership. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that TBAs can be used to conduct phase 1 assessments, and that these should be completed when there's any transfer of a commercial property. This protects a buyer from liability. And phase 1s can provide what we call all appropriate inquiry, which I said it just protects the buyer from future liability. So in addition to phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments, TBAs can be used for community outreach, and developing cleanup options and any associated costs. Next slide, please. So the way the process works for the TBAs that we've coordinated with Doug, first we'd set up what we call a kickoff meeting, and that would include EPA, we get our contractor on the line, Denver Urban Gardens, any other folks from the community garden group that are interested, and the property owner. We get them all together so we can learn as much as we can about the site before developing a sampling plan. We can be sure that we're on the same page with project goals, data needs, and any scheduling considerations that we need to know about. Then we do background research on how the site's been used in the past, and this really helps frame what we're going to be sampling for going forward. We also review the garden design, and that helps us determine where we want to be taking samples. So based on the past use and what the future plans are, we develop what we call a sampling and analysis plan. And it's really a collaborative process. We want to ensure we're meeting the needs of the garden group and Denver Urban Gardens, and that we're not doing any unnecessary sampling. After the sampling plan has been approved and we have a site access agreement, we're able to start sampling. And where possible, we try to get any community members or the site garden group to attend the sampling event. We can learn more from them about the future use, and also it helps to be able to explain to the community what we're doing, so they don't just see EPA out there collecting samples, because no one likes to see that if they don't know what's going on. And the picture that's on this slide here, it's from Fulton Elementary School, and they had their green team come out and visit us. We were taking samples, and we were able to coordinate with kids, talk about EPA sampling, and it was an overall great event. Next slide, please. So just sort of an overarching thing, just regardless of the degree of brownfields contamination, we really encourage every urban garden to implement best management practices, which are called BMPs, to ensure protection from urban soils. In most instances, following the BMPs will really interrupt or limit potential exposure pathways from existing site contamination. And typically cleanup is not necessary, but this is something you can work on with your state cleanup program or with EPA if there are questions about it. Some of the most common best management practices that we encourage include adding soil amendments. This can reduce or remove potential exposures. You may also want to consider alternative methods that don't involve growing plants directly in the ground soil, such as raised beds or greenhouses. And also we recommend keeping the paths covered, because these are areas that typically wouldn't have amendments added, and could have particulates that would get into the garden beds. So covering those paths with gravel or straw or some other substrate is what we recommend. One thing that we have found when sampling urban locations for gardens are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. These are commonly referred to as PAHs. And so these are really common, and they result from incomplete combustion of organic matter, such as gasolines and or diesel products. So when you have cars driving by, that's something that we often find in the soil. We also, especially in the Rocky Mountain area here, we find high arsenic concentrations that exceed regional screening levels. But in all the sites we've looked at so far, our toxicologists have made the determination that the levels are still safe for gardening, because they're in line with what we would typically see in an urban background. And so gardening in an urban background, there's some inherent risks that come with it because of, it is an urban environment. But one thing to note, EPA is not ever going to recommend that cleanup when background levels are high. We don't recommend cleanup that's more stringent than background areas of a given area. Next slide, please. So the type of sampling that we typically do at the garden sites is called incremental sampling. We found that this provides a really good representation or sort of average concentration of contaminant levels. The first thing we do with incremental sampling is to divide the site into smaller, more workable zones that usually have similar characteristics, and we call these decision units. We then identify equally spaced points within each zone for a composite sample, and the amount of space between each point depends on the size of the site. We take samples from those points, sieve them down together to ultrafine particles which represent the portion of soil that most likely adheres to the skin. We thoroughly mix the sample and then send the mixed composite sample to a lab for analysis. And we also take samples at varying depths, typically down to 18 inches, and the increments get larger the deeper we go. So this gives a good representation. It's also a cost-effective means because we're not sending too many samples to the lab. And one thing I should note, too, that if we suspect that there could be volatiles in certain areas, we'll take grab samples because the very process of compositing the samples would affect the integrity of the volatiles that we're trying to sample for. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go through a few sites that we've worked on with Denver Urban Gardens and also a few other examples from other parts of our region. The first one I'm going to touch on is the Asia Pacific Development Center. This is a nonprofit that provides services to Asian Americans and Pacific Islander communities, some of who are recent refugees. They requested our help. Doug wanted to help them develop a garden in their courtyard, but there was concern about contamination from nearby sources along with its East Colfax, and this is a major road that transects Denver and adjacent cities. As you can see from this slide, there are several potential sources of contamination in really close proximity to the center. Next slide, please. So due to the varying sources of contamination, we tested for a really wide range of petroleum and hazardous substances. Luckily, the results came back clean, and they now have this beautiful garden in their courtyard. And one thing that's pretty special about this site, it's allowed people to really connect back to foods and that they grew back in their home country, and it gives them a lot of peace and a good feeling here. So this is a nice success story. Next slide, please. Another site that we worked with Doug on is Triangle Park, and this is right in the heart of downtown Denver, and it had a notorious reputation as sort of a haven for drug dealers and drug users. National Geographic even, they have a show called Drugs Incorporated, and Triangle Park was unfortunately featured on the Denver edition. And it showed all sorts of illegal activities that were going on in broad daylight. So recognizing this problem and the community desire for a garden, Denver Parks and Rec closed the park and then partnered with Doug and EPA to test the soil. Contaminations at the site were, there used to be former gas stations, heavy traffic in the area, and other historic uses. Next slide, please. So with the exception of unfortunately, several needles that were found at the park, the results came back clean, and Denver Parks and Rec began construction of the new garden, which is doing very well today and has done a lot to sort of beautify this area that was not so lovely before. Both these sites sort of show how sometimes the perception of contamination is often way worse than what we actually find. Next slide, please. So looking beyond our partnership with Doug, brownfield resources have also been used to facilitate creation of new food co-ops, farmers markets, greenhouses, and to help provide access to healthy local food. One example I'd like to highlight is from Missoula, Montana, in the new Burns Street Nutrition Center. This market was built at a former FedEx depot in an area of town that previously had really limited access to grocery stores and healthy food options. The city used an EPA revolving loan fund grant to fund an asbestos cleanup at the former depot, and now this is a great resource for the community. Next slide, please. And also, I was just going to quickly point to a cautionary tale from Sacramento. This site was a community garden for over 30 years. Then plans were put in place to develop the garden into a housing project. To facilitate the new housing project, they tested the garden site and found really high levels of lead, PAHs, and pesticides. And before they could put housing on the site, they had to do a soil cleanup that scraped the top 4 feet of soil off. So to my knowledge, there hasn't been any health studies conducted, and I don't know if there are ongoing health effects, but it's just sort of an example to show that it's a good idea to test sites ahead of planting a garden there. Next slide, please. If you'd like any more resources on developing brownfield sites for urban agriculture, you can visit EPA's Brownfield webpage. And there's a business plan handbook, there's guidelines for safe gardening, and several other resources that you can tap into for EPA resources and urban gardening. And then the next slide, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. EPA also has a National Urban Garden Coordinator, Ann Carroll. She's really passionate about this and a wonderful resource to reach out to if you have additional questions. And now I just had some polling questions that I had forwarded on to Johanna and the group, and I think they're going to scroll through those to be sure that the points I wanted to convey were reached. And that's it.
Absolutely. So the first polling question is, TBAs provide funds directly to local communities. True or false? Okay, so it looks like 48% said true and 52% said false. Christina, what do you have to say about that?
So funds do not go to the community. It's the funds go to an EPA contractor, and EPA oversees the contract. So it's not that we're giving you funds, but we are providing a resource through our contractor.
All right, so next question is, there's a fee to apply for a TBA. True or false? All right, looks like 100% of the people said it's false.
Yay!
Good job.
That's great.
Next question. Before deciding whether or not to garden on a site, it is important to research its history. True or false? Okay, 100% true. And next question. TBAs are available to which of the following? Okay, it looks like 84% of you said A and B.
That is correct.
Awesome. And finally, last question is, TBAs can include the following services. Okay, it looks like 65% said all of the above except C.
And that's correct, too. We can do everything except for funding environmental cleanups through that resource.
Great. All right, and Christina, there was one question for you from the audience, and that was, is there an example of a site where cleanup was necessary? Could you
We have not had an example where cleanup is necessary. There has been the recommendation to do soil amendments, and with the thought that the soil will be amended and mixed in, it'll reduce the levels of contamination to below screening levels.
Okay, great. All right, so next up is Roseanne's presentation. Roseanne, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating. It's great to know that in our earlier poll that as I'm getting wiser, there are many more people still interested in what I think is a great place in the environmental field, and that is to marry business and environment and social equity by redeveloping brownfields. So I'm happy to share the story of our Brownfields program and how we have a specific project right now, Brownfields to Healthfields, that's focused on transforming community health. Next slide. Our own City of Phoenix Brownfields program began in about 2000. We started with an EPA assessment grant, and the program grew into a fully municipally funded program, and we primarily focused on commercial, retail, housing. We've done some projects to redevelop green space as well, and we've certainly had our experience in working with EPA grants from assessment, job training, area-wide, and way back when we also had a revolving loan fund. So I'm excited that we are taking our Brownfields program to the next level and really incorporating it into more of the sustainability and planning efforts that we're taking on as a city as a whole. Next slide. So we have a great opportunity right now with merging Brownfields redevelopment goals with the food and health goals that we've established in our comprehensive general plan called Plan Phoenix, and it really was a plan that was developed by the community, and the community coincidentally really were looking for sustainability. They wanted three main categories looked at: prosperity, environment, and health. So it gave the city an opportunity to directly get involved in the promotion of a healthy, affordable, sustainable food system, something that is new for the city. We've been involved indirectly in this effort, but now we are taking a more proactive approach. We also, at the same time, in developing our general plan, also were developing our 2050 sustainability goals. And as part of those environmental sustainability goals, we also included our local food system, really to eliminate food deserts, to increase urban agriculture, community gardens, farming, everything that's included, with the ultimate result of significantly reducing the rates of hunger, obesity, and diet-related disease. So ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want to make sure everyone is living with the good, healthy food. Next slide. So we certainly have our challenges in the city of Phoenix. We are the 5th largest city with a population of about 1.6 million. And as the largest city in the state and in our county, we have discovered that we have the majority of food deserts, which is a term that is evolving as we speak as well. I think originally U.S. Department of Agriculture defined it as a low-income area where residents live more than a mile from the nearest healthy food outlet. We here locally use low supermarket access as another definition, and because we live in a desert, we also joke about potentially changing food desert to maybe food opportunity to designate that it's really a place that there is an opportunity to make changes. So we have our share of folks that do not have access to healthy food. Next slide. And then, of course, as a result of that, in addition to other factors, we have health challenges. We have a pretty high food insecurity rate, significantly higher rate with child food insecurity, and that rate is actually at 22%, and in the United States it's about 19%. So we also have our share of health opportunities that we need to resolve as well. Next slide. As a result of all of that, we have brownfields in our city, we have those challenges, and we also have a lot of government and nonprofit and for-profit entities that are out there tackling the health and food system issue. So it's a great opportunity for the city to be able to partner with all of these agencies. And I just wanted to point that out to all of you that are out there thinking about doing Healthfields, or maybe you already do this kind of work, just haven't packaged it as Healthfields, is that there are great resources to tap into, from your local community health organization to nonprofit health foundations, hospitals and health organizations. We have a Valley of the Sun United Way, which I'm sure is located in many cities across the country, that has a very specific End Hunger initiative in Maricopa County. And we are fortunate in the city that we partnered and helped to found the Maricopa County Food System Coalition, which also has been a great resource with lots of folks involved in farming, nutrition, education, and all of that involved in helping to improve our food system. So partnership is really a key to getting all of these projects done, as is evidenced by some of the work that Christina and her group are doing in their projects. Next slide. Specifically for our City of Phoenix Brownfields to Healthfields project, we are definitely focused on matching the need for food and healthcare assets with brownfields redevelopment. We were awarded, it's been 2 years now, a $400,000 community-wide assessment grant, and this slide just illustrates for you the good number of partners that are at the table with us. So in addition to EPA, we've got state and county government agencies, nonprofits, and we've got a great consultant working with us as well. Next slide. Because our city is so large, 500 plus square miles, we really decided to begin to focus on specific project areas within the city. And if you could click one more time, this overlays the location of food deserts, low supermarket access areas, and medically underserved areas as well. So when you overlay all of that, and in addition to what we know about our brownfields inventories that we've begun, brownfields, food deserts, and medically underserved areas all coincidentally happen to be in the same locations. Next slide. So our project really is taking our project from initially doing an inventory, which is probably pretty typical for brownfields assessment grants that are out there. What we know in the City of Phoenix is that brownfield sites are privately owned, and as we did our inventory, we focused on sites that were smaller in size within those target areas and are more, if I can say, lightly contaminated. So we're not looking at the worst of the worst sites. We were looking at vacant land, land that might have a building or two on it, 5 acres and less in size. So we identified about 200 properties within that our target areas, and we've started doing phase 1s and phase 2s on sites that were actually referred to us through those partnerships. We also plan to do health monitoring in specific target areas through surveys in partnership with some of our county health folks and potentially nonprofits to identify what the health of residents in that particular area looks like now, and after we've redeveloped sites in those areas for food and healthcare assets, what it looks like afterwards. So we know anecdotally that this usually happens, but we want to have real data to ensure that we have opportunities to do this kind of work in other areas as well. We have not yet started our individual outreach and visioning with the community, but hope to begin that at the beginning of next year. So next slide. And I just want to give you a couple of examples. We currently are working on about 7 sites throughout the city. A few of them have gone to completion. What we found primarily on these sites have been lead and arsenic in the soil at levels high enough that some cleanup does have to occur. So this particular project is the Pueblo Viejo Fields Farm and Food Hub. It's a great project that we hope to see more of these kinds of projects in other locations. It's in a food desert area. It is done by a group called Kinsea and Green on Purpose. So what they've done is taken about a 2-acre site. There's a portion for community gardens, and then there's a larger area for farming where they are teaching developmentally disabled adults and veterans agricultural training. So it's a job generator as well. They have cold storage so they can take in produce from local farmers and then get it back out into the community. They're also serving a local school in that area and are looking to serve additional schools as well. We just won a local statewide award called Arizona Forward, and we're the first place winner in a healthy communities area. So we're really pleased about this particular project. Next slide. Another project located in South Phoenix, South Mountain area is the Spaces of Opportunity project, a community-driven project done by the Cultivate South Phoenix group. It's really about a 20-acre parcel, again, urban farming, community garden space, and they're starting on building arts and culture space to have education and training on health and nutrition, and also to have a space available for the community to have arts and music and festivals so that it celebrates the entire area. So again, the primary contaminant in this area was lead and arsenic. They're doing a whole area of an orchard, and they're doing lots of growing in this particular site. So a lot of community involvement here as well. And the last example is, next slide, is a project that is fairly new, and this is a partnership with a nonprofit and a school district. Garfield Garden on the Corner is at Garfield Elementary School. And so Mullen Foundation, a local nonprofit that focuses on health and nutrition for kids, is doing a school garden project that involves not only growing but cooking and nutrition and having each of the students get hands-on education with gardening, including their parents. So this is a new project that is just getting underway, and again, Mullen is hoping to do this kind of work at other schools as well. So we've had some good experiences in working with these kinds of projects in our area. We are starting a significant outreach effort with our healthcare agencies in the city to start looking at trying to develop our first healthcare clinic on a brownfield site. So next slide. In conclusion, I would just say that some of the most important things that you need to remember as you do these kinds of projects is it really is all about collaboration and partnerships. That way you can take advantage of the resources that not only EPA has, but also funding opportunities from other nonprofits, philanthropics, and other government agencies. So try, if you can, to get a priority within your city and your community, and that certainly gives you an opportunity to get those good, successful stories for your elected officials as well. And that's about all I've got to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roseanne. Roseanne had some polling questions. Firstly, what type of Healthfields reuse are you most interested in? Okay, it looks like 33% are food production, 40% are community gardens, and 13% food retail. And the second question is, if you are a government, have you established food system goals in your state, county, or city? Okay, 25% yes and 75% no. All right, and moving on, we have Ben Fahrer's presentation. So take it away from here.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here. And man, watching Christina and Roseanne's presentation, it's just amazing to see the support and advocacy and work that you guys have done, especially in Denver and Phoenix. I'm fortunate enough to be transplanted into the urban environment. I'm an organic farmer from the rural setting, and I think it's really important to note that often farmers are left out of the conversation, and most of them aren't in the urban setting as far as farmers with the availability to witness natural systems at a certain scale and through a certain lens. Most urban farmers, which I've come to know, have had to adapt and adjust to a very sophisticated landscape that has been piped and paved, and a lot of those systems aren't as available. So this idea of going to a health field, I think, is amazing, and noting that it's not in Wikipedia. So Rosanna, I think you're on that one because your presentation was amazing, and I think you should go onto Wikipedia and make that happen. So I'm going to be talking about some of the frontiers that I believe and others in urban agriculture, and you guys have stated a lot of them, and the utilization of this idea of green fields, gray fields, brown fields into these health fields. So we know that more people now live in cities than ever before, and a lot of the land in our urban settings have really been misused, mismanaged, and contaminated, as we've been discussing. And it's really, we've inherited a bad design, and it's a colonized development practice where we've displaced nature, we've displaced the native people, and now we have inherited that. How do we make best use of that? And we're in the city of Berkeley and Oakland, and there's a long history, a lot of industry here, but a lot of those things have now been outsourced or moved, yet the port is still very active, and a lot of the infrastructure still remains here in the East Bay. And so how do we reappropriate that and reappropriate some of these lands? Right now we have a lot of housing driving the design. There is some environmental checks and balances that help soften the impact here. And there's this idea of new urbanism and transportation-driven design has really helped influence a lot of the recent entitlements. And urban agriculture has helped with some of the open space. And prior to 2008, there was a lot of emphasis going in this direction with LEED certified and whatnot. But then when the recession hit, budgets tightened and a lot of things were left. And now we're in a place where, unfortunately, big developers are wanting the EPA to go away, not so much in California, but wanting them to go away so they can just develop how they want. This is not a good practice, and hopefully it's hard to find a developer who has their head and heart in the right place and has their ethos in the right place. So I've been very fortunate to work with some great clients that I'll mention here in a minute. But Top Leaf Farms, we're a for-profit urban farming operation as opposed to a nonprofit. We do design, build, we then operate the farms, and then we help people learn about it. We're all certified organic, and we do a lot of biodynamic practices. And hyperlocal, meaning that we're only delivering within a 3-mile radius of the farms, ultra fresh, same-day harvest, sometimes within just hours. Just came from deliveries myself this morning. And we are a licensed and bonded landscape contractor. We have 3 projects that are in design, going through entitlement in the process, 2 projects that are being built, and 1 fully operational farm that I'll give some case studies here. The other part of our operation is a urban farm co-op, and this is the cornerstone hub where what I've realized is that a lot of the resources that are available to farmers in other parts of the country and land aren't as readily available to urban farmers, and we have to piece a lot of things together. So we've come up with a great site at an old oxygen plant here in West Oakland that has been reappropriated, and we have a nursery and demonstration, or a nursery and urban farm hub for seed, start, soil, supplies, and support to help urban farmers kind of advance their technical skill and boost their production to have a certain impact within the food system. Our vision in redefining urban agriculture is really through these innovative systems so that we can grow an abundance of food and create more beneficial native habitat, more of these health fields. We want to build over 5 acres of rooftop farms, street farms, and urban agricultural corridors to produce 50 tons of organic food annually by 2020. And these are high rotational crops that I'll mention in a minute. They're not the squash, they're not the pumpkins that have a lot of poundage. So unfortunately, we're not focusing on those, mostly because we're looking at how we can best utilize per square foot our space. We're really trying to innovate ideas of ways that agriculture can be integrated into this urban environment with different developers, and we really value the high quality organic food, labor efficiency, mindfulness, ecological stewardship, and zero waste. So we only harvest what has been ordered. Now, this idea of green fields, engaging native land management practices, no new sites is one of our ethos. We don't really need to develop on sites that haven't been developed before. The areas that we can incorporate urban agriculture as a stepping stone in these gray fields, I think, is an incredible opportunity that we see with AB 551 and some different legislation that's happened in California. The brownfields, those which we've been talking a lot as well, are opportunities for these bioremediation, microremediation, and things that can happen. Natural farming, Masanobu Fukuoka, he's a leader. He passed away a few years ago, but we're talking about growing crops, but we're also talking about cultivation of human beings. And I think our two earlier presenters and a lot of urban agricultural projects are really looking at these social yields. And this speaks to us. And we partner with a lot of amazing nonprofits, City Slicker Farms in West Oakland, Planning Justice, and working with Oakland Food Policy Council to help address some of these social impacts. However, as a for-profit company, we're focusing more on the production base and how do we scale up urban agricultural focus. So it was mentioned earlier, know your place, the place-based story, do some research. This is one case study here, 51st and Telegraph in North Oakland. Some of the history there on the left, as far as it being a native site for the native people, and then a really complex and developed site that then, in the 89 Loma Prieta earthquake, there was a theater and a bank that, the bank got converted, but then the theater burnt, and the site has been vacant for the last 14 years. And it's, Christmas tree farm on this side, and another side was the bank. We came in as the developer said, well, we're waiting for our building process. Would you like to farm this site while we're waiting? So we had this transition, and we tested this soil on a quarter of the 3/4 of acre that we had access to, and it was viable. We came in, did a cover crop. We outlined the space. We mowed that, incorporated it, and then this is all, the photos I just showed are all within a 3.5-month period. So it went very quickly. We were there for 14 months, and it was amazing. Very highly public intersection in Oakland. We set up a nursery that we then were growing starts for this and our rooftop farm. Lots of different leafy greens, high rotational things, some different peppers. This is what the site looked like in 2008. Again, same in 2011. It was 14 years. It was vacant. You can see the bank is now gone. We put up the nursery, and then this is what it will be looking like in 2020. It's about an acre of rooftop farm with a lot of units, residential units on there. So we are incorporating some different ideas with the ecological infrastructure, how we can incorporate water mostly through flow-through planters, storm drain connections, and recycling some of this water on site. I won't get into too much detail about this, but we are taking East Bay mud water up to the roof and using it. How can we utilize a groundwater or a ground level water feature to mimic a natural stream? So how can we create something that is oxygenating and re-enlivening the water before we use it up on the roof? There's concepts, some of them like a waterfall window are elaborate that most likely won't get built because of budgets and things, but flow-through planters and even just like walls that help cascade water. And these I think are really important in the urban environment because people don't have the access to a lot of natural systems. So if we can mimic them in the ecological infrastructure, it's priceless in a lot of ways. Using flow forms to oxygenate the water, and then also incorporating fish into the fertility system, so that we're using fish to help fertilize the crops. So connecting these systems, we do a whole sheet on how much water we're using. It's quite a bit of water, so through the ways in which we can incorporate the water system, we can bring this down quite a bit. The next site I want to go through, and sorry I'm going a little fast, I know we're running out of time, is in Berkeley. This is what the site looked like. You see this large building on the bottom corner that was a vacant, an old vacant car dealership. It was in 2008. In 2015, they started construction of student housing for the University at California, Berkeley. This is modular construction, so once they started the construction, it was only a year later, these went up kind of like Legos up onto the top, and in April of 2016 it looked like this, and just a few months later in November it looked like this, which each roof, 16 roofs out of 18 planted living roofs that were planted in high rotational crops that we were then operating. It has an integrated building, so in the basement we have our annex and processing area that we're able to bring our produce down, supplies up, and then out to the restaurants. The layouts of roofs are pretty compact, but also very linear in some fashion for production's sake. We installed about 370 yards of growing medium up onto the roof, and different infrastructure that was put in. We have management practices where we're using very small-scale tools, innovative tools in use. Very minimal. This is like growing in topsoil or potty mix. Really, it's pretty amazing stuff that we engineered, we designed, did lots of testing to make for stormwater management and weights and measures and whatnot. This is one of our roofs with arugula, basil, different dandelion greens, and we have 87 beds, and we're churning about 4 to 6 of these every week and planting about 4 to 6 every week. So it's quite a high rotation, but in order to make it work economically, we're needing to do that. So you can see these mostly leafy greens all in through here. We have hedgerows for beneficial insect habitat and wind screens. We also cut flowers from these. And then the perennial herbs of thyme, sage, oregano, mint. We have some other herbs that we incorporate into there. And then we grow different, mostly lettuces. So we have like Salanovas on the right, which is a fully mature lettuce that has small leaves completely, and then different baby gems and things that are just incredible. I love it. Sorry, a lot of food porn here that could happen, or farm porn in that sense. But these are some of the crops that we grow, and then we also do microgreen production. That is, we grow down in the basement, but now we also do up on the roof. So the loading of the roof. Question? Yeah. Okay. So here's a picture of that roof right now, and we have these different opportunities. Large-scale commercial rooftop production in the Bay Area. We're the only one that's doing it. There's a lot in New York and Chicago and different places like that. It's a great market sector. These ideas of creating agri-hoods, like Roseanne, you were mentioning, these opportunities for more food being accessed in these food deserts. We're not living necessarily in a food desert, but there are parts of Oakland and things that I would consider our food prisons, where people don't necessarily have access to the food that they need. And they're kind of locked into this, what is available there. So that's one of the reasons City Slicker was started. But that's a Ron Finley term from LA, looking at these food prisons that we have. And I didn't get into all those things, but our earlier speakers spoke to these. But it's an amazing opportunity that we have to be growing on roofs. I was looking at the Garfield garden that you have there, and it's amazing rooftops available. So we have an incredible advisory team, different people from all different areas, different farmers, seed farmers. Michael Abelman, incredible mentor of mine. Raj Patel, author and activist, economist. And Esperanza was part of the Oakland Food Policy Council for years. So looking at the holistic sense of how we approach these projects with the focus on the production. So you can go to our website and check out all the information that we have, and anybody wants to ask any questions or email me, all my contact is on there as well. And like I said, we have some amazing clients, Nautilus Group and Rad Urban Design, that's helped a lot. We also work with the Tenderloin Neighborhood Development Corporation and Essex Property Trust. And organizations like Cliff Bar have also been very helpful, who I know are sponsoring this webinar. They've been very helpful in advocating for different things around seed, and they're just down the street from us too, and we've given tours to that group as well. So very grateful for the clients and the opportunities that people are promoting with looking at how we can be more innovative now that more people live in the city.
Great. Thank you so much for our presenters for these amazing presentations. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in right now, and we will make sure to answer them. So I'm just looking at some questions right now. For Ben, do you pay rooftop rent for those rooftop farms?
Yes, we do. Like I said earlier, there's developers with good ethos, and they paid for the installation of them, and then we have a lease operational agreement. We had a year process to help get us profitable and going, which we're now coming to completion on that. And then we have a unique lease agreement that is we cover, once we meet our operational costs and we come into a profit, we pay a certain percentage of that profit, but never to exceed a certain amount per square foot. It works out to about 50 cents per square foot per year. So, and that is in the rooftop agriculture field, that is one that a lot of rooftop farmers kind of hover around that 50 cents per square foot per year. Farming isn't easy, and making ends meet on salad greens and lettuces and things, and even going to high-end restaurants and things like Chez Panisse and different people that we sell to, it's still a lot of resources that it takes to grow food, and the labor pool is one that we really hope to advocate with our food hub, getting more urban farmers trained up so that we can be more efficient in how we can produce food. A lot of good farmers, but not too many in the urban environment right now.
Great, thank you. And Roseanne, are you still online?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay, so we have some questions for you too. Have you transformed any unnecessarily wide asphalt streets into urban farms?
That's an interesting question, because we do have very wide streets in the city of Phoenix. We have not yet, no, but actually doing something like that on our streets is a little bit more of our new Complete Streets program, and where we're looking to include bike paths and more tree and shade in our areas. So we may see something happen more along the line of trees rather than gardens.
Okay, great. And one more question for you is, how does the return on investment for Healthfields compare to other brownfields redevelopment projects? If this information is not available in dollars, then can you speak to the return on investment with respect to social equity, health equity, and sustainability?
Right. I don't have the actual dollars on the return on investment yet. As the food hub starts to generate some revenues, we may see something there. We also are looking at some urban farms. But for now, the biggest benefit will be that community cohesion and that opportunity to bring health into that area with food that was never there before. So the return on investment for Healthfields projects is a little bit different. We're not always looking for profit, but we're looking for the other social and sustainability aspects that are beneficial.
Great. Okay, thank you. There are no further questions at this time. Thank you again to our amazing speakers for the presentations, and to our sponsor, the Cliff Bar Family Foundation. And make sure to listen to the recording and answer the survey questions. Thank you so much.